Hello, I'm Hayden Gann. I'm a recent graduate of the Masters of Literature program at Washington State University. I've been studying English fiction and writing for the better part of a decade because I also got my undergraduate degree in English at Drury University in Missouri. I've developed my teaching style in a way that focuses heavily on ongoing reflection in between the more technical lessons because, as with any skill, I believe that reflection is paramount to showing and understanding your progress. I also like to focus on big picture ideas at first, and then getting into more of the detailed minutiae as we progress with the lessons. I believe this helps the students or clients have something to which they can anchor the material. When teaching writing specifically, I prefer to focus on developing the writing process and relating all the other lessons to that. When I was teaching English composition for the last 2 years, the way I usually did it was I would break down the writing process into steps and then focus each subsequent lesson on each of those steps of the writing process so they could build that process up over time. The first step of which is the pre-writing stage. And in each of these, I break it up into four major steps with some subcategories within them. And the first of which is the pre-writing step. This contains three components, the research, brainstorming, and outlining pieces. All of these are really important to, starting your piece of writing or your essay or whatever. The most important of which, in my opinion, is the outline. When I was teaching my students, they were mostly freshmen, so they didn't typically write outlines. They weren't in that habit yet. And so that was my top priority whenever we would start the semester. I would have them, really get into the habit of building up their outlines and really setting themselves up for success through building detailed outlines so that they would have just a much easier time of making a polished piece of writing overall. And then research and brainstorming both go into that outline. So really everything in the pre-writing step for me is focused on outlining or just organizing your thoughts into words before you actually get into drafting. And speaking of which, drafting is the second step in how I teach the writing process. I like to tell people that they should focus on just getting words on the page without worrying about it too much, because then their writing can be improved in later steps. I believe it's really important just to physically write. I think that is the most important step of the whole process, is just to get words on the page. And then, I try to encourage people not to overthink what is going on the page, because in the latter two steps of the process, they can, polish things and come back to their ideas and just really improve their writing. So they needn't worry about quality at first, because that can be improved throughout the ongoing process. The next step is revision, and I do separate this from editing because I do believe they are distinct, and it's important to do them in a certain order. I believe revision should be done before editing, because revision is the focus on the macro side of the writing. It is tackling how well your ideas are conveyed through the written word or throughout the piece. If it's an argumentative essay, for example, you would want to make sure all of your ideas are connected to the thesis. You want to make sure each of your points are clear and relevant. You want to make sure that the reader would have an okay time understanding all of your points. And lastly, that everything would sort of make a complete picture, and thus better convince the reader of whatever it is you're trying to argue. The last step of this process is the editing process, and this is the more the focus on the minutia, the more technical details of the writing, such as the spelling, the grammar, the punctuation, things like that. And I tell my students or clients to focus on this last, because through the drafting, revision, and redrafting processes, the sentences and words you use are bound to change anyway. So if you spend all of your time and energy fixing your spelling errors or your grammar errors early in the process, they might not even be there at the end of the process anyway. So I believe revision should be done first, and then editing should be the final step, because it's going to give the paper the final polish of the whole process. And also, I think it's important to outline the process in these steps, because again, it does help with that sense of reflection throughout the writing process and writing in general. I want students and clients to be thinking about these steps in very specific terms, so that they might be able to adapt this sort of general guideline to their own writing style and own preferences. I believe developing your own personal style in writing is very important as well. And lastly, I think that while I do outline these steps in a specific order, it is very useful oftentimes to come back to each of the steps. So for instance, if you do pre-writing and then drafting and a revision, you can go back to drafting, you can go back to pre-writing if you want to do a specific like smaller outline for another paragraph. I do that all the time in my own writing. So it's just sort of a loose structure to help students develop their own process in their own way. Thank you.